Did you mean gorgelicious or did you mean gorgetastic? All right, take a seat. Come into my office, take a seat. I'm looking at myself in my mirror. I'm hoping this is a good angle. We're gonna pray. Please be a good angle. Okay. All right, guys, back with another solo episode. Back with another solo episode. On today's episode, we are going to discuss, while I sit on my beanbag, boundaries and also discuss discipline. We're going to discuss these two as separate entities. We're also going to discuss how they intertwine frequently. But let's kick things off with boundaries. I'm not going to give you the definition because I didn't look it up, okay? But let's speak vaguely on what a boundary is. Boundary is that line in the sand. The sand that you might give a person, you might give a job, you might give just a aspect to your life. It's where you're basically like, that's as far as you can go, bro. And this goes for so many different things. It goes for friendships, romantic, family, work, just with yourself. What are your boundaries that you have with yourself? And as I am about to be 28 in 2 months, I would say this past year, speaking on 2025, I really grasped the concept of boundaries. I think it's something that we have to work on constantly. But in the past year, I really realized where I was lacking in boundaries in my life. And like I said, I'm sure that I will continue to learn more, right? But I've made some progress, so I can speak on this a little bit. If you're asking yourself, Lauren, where do I know to set a boundary in my life? Like, I'm just out here living, girl. I ain't thinking about that. I'm not thinking about where I need to set a boundary. When you're navigating relationships with different people, it's whether it's friendship, family, romantic, or work, always ask yourself, what do I want this relationship dynamic to look like? Because sometimes we forget to do that and we just march to the beat of their drum. Sometimes that just works. Everything just flows in harmony. But where boundaries are probably necessary is when people are expecting too much of you, if people are pushing you to do things you don't want to do. The best example I can give is going out. Whether it's going out clubbing, going out to a bar, going out to a dinner. In life, we need to have compromise. Because I have been in situations where I've planned a very extravagant dinner for some friends who were visiting, and they refuse to go to that dinner because they don't like to go out. That's where maybe they could have compromised with me on their boundary, right? Because I'm doing an incredibly nice gesture, and it's one of those things where let's compromise. Maybe you show up to the dinner for an hour, and if the dinner keeps running long, then you go home because you don't like to stay out past a certain hour, okay? But a different boundary would be that friend who's always hounding you to go out. They're saying, please, like, let's go party. And you have boundaries where you don't want to do that because you have to work on things. You have certain projects that you're working on. You have certain things you want to do. So you tell this friend no, and then they get mad. Okay? People might get mad at you when you set your boundaries. Another boundary could be maybe a friend who's always wanting to hang out at your crib. They're always wanting to spend the night. And you love hanging out with this friend, you love having them over, but you might need to set a boundary. You might need to be like, hey, you can't spend the night every weekend. So when you're navigating your life and you're looking at your different interpersonal dynamics, that's where some reflection, some self-reflection needs to come into play. Because if you identify areas that you have problems in your life, and if you identify the problems, maybe they're resulting from other people, take a step back and realize, what am I allowing too much of? What am I giving my energy away to? What am I allowing too much access to? And then you kindly reframe the dynamic and set that boundary. And like I said, sometimes people are not going to enjoy this and they're going to be really upset, okay? That's where I want to pivot into discipline and how that intertwines with boundaries. But first, when we talk about discipline, essentially discipline is consistency towards your goals, right? Discipline is taking action when you don't feel like taking action, but you need to do that because what equals progress? Consistent action over time. That's discipline. If we're talking about working out and health and fitness, there's discipline involved in that if you have certain fitness goals. Let's say you're a runner and you want to be able to run a 10K in the next 2 to 3 months. You need discipline if you're starting from ground zero to stick to a running plan, stick to a running program. That takes discipline. Let's say you're a content creator and you're wanting to start with short form content. You need discipline to come up with creative ideas and post consistently every day on TikTok, every day on Instagram to reach those goals. You need to come up with video ideas and you need to post those consistently every day. That takes discipline. Now, when we talk about boundaries with ourselves and other people, boundaries help you achieve your goals and remain in discipline, okay? That's what I learned last year. You might feel mean by telling someone, no, you can't have a sleepover, you can't come over. No, I'm not gonna go party with you. No, I can't go to that event. Yes, you will feel mean maybe in the moment if boundaries are a new concept for you, and I'm assuming so, who I'm talking to. But what I want you to reframe your mindset with is, what is your overarching goal? What is the big picture, babe? What is the big picture? It's running that 10K race and hitting that time you want to hit. It's growing your TikTok to like 10,000 followers. How are you going to do that? You need to have that time for yourself to take action to work on your goals. And maybe one of these things that you need to set a boundary on would be conflicting with your self goals. And if you have boundaries with yourself, a boundary with yourself could be, oh, but Lauren, I want to go out with these people. I don't want to like have to say no. Okay, your boundary would be, I need to be home by a certain time. That's a self boundary. Maybe we're not setting the boundary with others. Nobody's pressing us. But to remain in discipline, we need to have boundaries within ourselves and with others. The reason I bring this up is because I am a very extroverted, outgoing person. I love people. I love spending time with people. And I'm an ex-people pleaser a little bit. I was never crazy on that. But, you know, I like to keep the peace. I like everybody happy. And when I first learned to set boundaries, navigating that was essentially hard for me because I felt like I was letting people down. I was hurting people's feelings, and that's even worse. I'm less concerned about letting people down and more concerned about hurting people's feelings. I'm an empath. I'm an extroverted empath, and I don't want anybody to be upset. Okay, I don't want anybody to be upset because I know what it feels like to feel upset. And that was hard. But what helped me was when I reframed my mindset and I realized, oh, I'm setting this boundary with this person. I'm denying this request because I have this side of the coin, my discipline, my overarching picture, my dream, my goal. If I don't set this boundary right now, I'm actually conflicting with what I really want for my life. You see what I mean? That's why you don't want to be a yes man. Because when you're a yes man, you're saying yes to everybody else but yourself. Now, take all this with a little bit of a grain of salt because there's all balance. Because what did I say earlier in the video? Compromise is necessary. We don't want to isolate ourselves. And boundaries wouldn't even necessarily be about always like pushing people away, right? Like boundaries could be different things. Like I just want to change this relationship dynamic. But discipline and boundaries, in my opinion, go hand in hand. This isn't about self-isolation. This isn't about like grind and work so hard and never have fun with your life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, if you're ever put in a situation where you feel like the bad guy because you're denying some sort of request, think about you're probably doing it because there's something of major priority in your life that you would like to achieve, that you need to have discipline on, that you promised yourself that you would have discipline on. So don't feel bad for focusing on those things. That's what I'm saying here. Compromise is always necessary. You don't necessarily need to compromise a boundary. So I want to go back to that first point when I said I threw this not major, but I threw this put together this dinner. It was super exciting, and I was essentially denied this request based on the fact that they had a boundary of they go to bed at 8:30 p.m. or something. That's a boundary this is an example of a boundary where, well, maybe a little compromise could be necessary, right? If somebody is planning a nice dinner for you, maybe you can extend your bedtime by an hour if you're on a vacation, okay? But a boundary that maybe needs to have a change in a relationship dynamic would then again be maybe that friend who's spending the night every weekend. The boundary doesn't have to be you can never spend the night and hang out with me. The boundary might be we need to cut back, and there's some compromise there too, right? So it's a little bit of give and take depending on what it is. There's some boundaries in life that are like a hard line in the sand, and that's just what it is. To protect our peace, our mental well-being, our energy, our time, our bodies. There's layers to the boundaries, y'all. There's layers. But that's all I have for y'all tonight. I have a lot of short form videos that I have to edit. I love you guys. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to have some amazing guest stars, guest speakers on in the next couple of weeks. I know I pulled this back to every other week, and that is because I kind of had to set a boundary with myself, right? It could be that. I need to find balance. It was more about finding balance in my life. I work in corporate. I have a job that I care deeply about. I have a social life that I wasn't maintaining to its full capacity, and I should maintain that a little bit for my mental well-being. I'm into working out. I'm into my short form content creation, and I'm into my little artistic hobbies and video editing. So basically, for me to keep up with my podcast, I can do this bi-weekly. But I love you, Queenie Pops. Thanks for tuning in.